Warner Brothers inches closer to a decision on Tenet's release date. Directors are hired for the next film from Andy Weir, author of The Martian, and Scream 5 starts recruiting cast members from the original film. All that and more here on OneTake Daily. Welcome to OneTake Daily, where we talk about the latest TV, film, and pop culture news every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But before we get into all that, I'm Gil, here with my brother Adam.
Hello.
And my tech guy / brother Alun.
Yo.
And of course, quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to make sure you get notified the next time we go live. Adam, let's start with our favorite story that comes up over and over. This has kind of become my barometer for how the world is doing with COVID-19, and that's Tenet. Christopher Nolan's Tenet, our most anticipated movie of the year. It's still scheduled for a July 17th release date, and every week we get another news article along the lines of the one we saw from Deadline today, which says, is Tenet still sticking on its July 17th release date? The whole film industry, all of Hollywood, is looking to Tenet as the potential savior of cinema around the world, and exhibitors were expecting a decision this week on whether or not Warner Brothers was going to stick to the July 17th release date. And there was no announcement, no news, and this might be a case where no news is good news. They haven't delayed it yet, but Deadline reports that some of their sources have revealed what is going into Warner Brothers' decision. So what it comes down to is that for it to make financial sense for this movie to open, we need only 80% of all of the world's movie theaters to be open by July.
The world's movie theaters.
That's right. They need 3,500 domestic theaters and 30,000 international theaters to be open by July 17th for it to make sense to open this movie. Or at least that is what Warner Brothers is currently thinking.
I wonder how many are open now. It's probably a lot less.
Yeah, right now in America, I was actually reading there is some box office to report in the U.S. right now. I think it's less than $100,000 a week. It's all coming from drive-in theaters. And presumably that 80% of all theaters, that number's a little bit inflated because the assumption is that when movie theaters open, part of the safety protocol will be they cannot open at capacity. Right, you're going to have seats in between people. You won't be able to fit as many people in one theater as you could prior to the pandemic. Now, what else is going into this decision is just how much this movie cost. It's a $200 million budget that probably doesn't include marketing. And on top of that, reports say that Christopher Nolan will get 20% of the first dollar gross of this film. Adam, do you know what first dollar gross means?
Is that... No, I don't know what that means. I'm guessing it translates to a lot of money for him.
Christopher Nolan's going to make a lot of money off this movie. So a lot of times filmmakers get screwed because they get a percentage of the film's profit. And in Hollywood, there's a lot of funny accounting they can use that even if a movie does really well, they can report all sorts of costs that make the movie look unprofitable. So if you're as powerful as Christopher Nolan, you can ask for a percentage of first dollar gross, which means you start making money the moment the first ticket is sold rather than having to wait for the movie to actually be profitable, and then you get a percentage of gross revenue. So that just goes into the equation of how much money this movie needs to make for Warner Brothers to be happy and to recoup what they spent on it. And sources say they don't expect a formal decision to be made until very close to the release of this movie. So I would expect us probably on a weekly basis to get articles just like this one for the next month or so, just asking, is Tenet going to release on time? Adam, every time this news story comes up, I always ask you, you're my barometer, how's it looking? Do you think it's realistic for Tenet to release on July 17th?
I think it's realistic. That said, the 80% thing is giving me some pause. But I'm still on the side of, yes, they're going to stick to that date. Because it seems like the plans they have in place for how to mitigate the transmission of coronavirus during all of this and how to make people feel safe and everything like that, I think they have a good plan in place. It's just a question of, do they think people are going to get over the fear And I think they will in most places because people are kind of getting sick of staying inside.
And Sammy in the chat says, hey, guys. Hey, Sammy, thanks for joining. Feel free to chime in. And Adam, I'm feeling a lot like you, where I'm starting to feel more optimistic that it's at least a realistic possibility. This is all based on my totally unscientific feel from going for a drive the other day and just seeing a lot of people out and about and paying attention to what I'm seeing on Facebook. It just feels like people are starting to get stir crazy, and we know the risks. We know a little bit more about how to handle the risks. It seems like people are ready to go out of the house. Now, I will say, whatever happens, I don't think we're going to be surprised. Meaning, a few weeks from now, we're going to be watching what happens around the world, and 3 to 4 weeks from now, we're all going to have a pretty good idea of whether or not this is realistic. Meaning, we're going to see if beaches reopen, do people go? If supermarkets start to have more people in them. I don't think Tenet is going to be the thing leading the way. It's going to be the other way around, right? We'll watch the rest of the economy, and then we'll see what happens. Now, if it does open in July, some people are worried about how it's going to perform. Not just because people are going to be too scared to leave the house and go to the theater, but think about marketing. Right before a movie comes out, the marketing machine turns. You get commercials, billboards, radio ads. Sporting events are huge. These movies get advertised at sporting events, and of course, right now, there aren't a whole lot of those happening. So you would think they've got to make this decision sooner rather than later. If they decide July 5th that they're going to release the movie in a week, that just gives them a 1-week window to market the movie. So I will say, I guess, Adam, your thoughts on marketing this movie. Some people are saying that without people driving around and listening to the radio, without sporting events going on, they might not be able to advertise this movie enough.
I think just the whole situation actually lends itself to more publicity for the movie. So if people hear, hey, there's a major movie that's actually going to come out, they're reopening all the theaters, this is the movie that's leading the way, that alone is going to get on every news station, and probably everyone in America will know the word Tenet.
Exactly. And the number of articles I read referring to billboards, and I thought to myself, is that really the big funnel that gets people into the theater, is billboards? So I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be any issue marketing this movie. I think the news will be marketing the movie for them, because every news channel, every news website is going to be saying, hey, cinemas are reopening, and they're all playing one movie on literally every screen. Not to mention, there's something called the internet, which is a great marketing tool. In fact, Scoob, which was just released also by Warner Brothers this past weekend, had a TikTok event to try and drum up publicity. That TikTok video, over 4 billion views.
Whoa.
So I think there will be no issue marketing this movie. I think if it opens in July, it'll mean that people are ready to leave the house, and it's going to do gangbusters at the box office. Last thing I want to mention about Tenet is the Deadline article heard from inside sources that it's, quote, as amazing as Inception. So if you needed that little extra push, you were on the fence, do I really need to see another movie from Christopher Nolan? Boom. I think we should go see it.
Now, what would be more meaningful to you if the article said it's as amazing as Inception, or it's as amazing as Interstellar?
For me, Inception is a little bit higher on my list than Interstellar. I love both movies, and I have no doubt when there's a Christopher Nolan movie coming out, I know I'm going to see it, so it almost doesn't matter. But for me, Inception inches above Interstellar by a little bit. How about you?
I want to say Interstellar, but probably just because I've seen it more recently.
Yeah, how about you, Owen? What's your number one Christopher Nolan movie? Or at least between those two?
Probably Inception, but I don't know. Interstellar. I
just love space so much.
I love the idea of Interstellar more, right, but I like Inception a little more.
Yeah, agreed. Any other thoughts on Tenet? Any other predictions around U.S. cinemas and global cinemas reopening?
Yeah, I don't want it to be as good as Inception. I want it to be even better, though.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, I think we can all agree with that. Well, moving on, Alon, if you like space, you're going to be excited about this. In 2015, a little movie called The Martian, directed by Ridley Scott, starring Matt Damon, came out based on a book by Andy Weir, and it killed it with critics, killed it at the box office. So since then, Hollywood has been watching Andy Weir closely for whatever he does next. Back in 2017, Chris Miller and Phil Lord were hired to adapt his next novel, Artemis, into film. There's really been no word on that for the last few years. It kind of disappeared after Fox got swallowed up by Disney. But earlier this year, it was announced that Weir is writing another book. And MGM has already paid 7 figures for the rights to produce it. What we've learned about it so far is that the book is being referred to as Project Hail Mary. That's a working title, not the actual title of the book. All we know of the synopsis is that a solitary astronaut on a spaceship it's about a solitary astronaut on a spaceship who is tasked with saving the planet.
Yes.
And Ryan Gosling is going to play that astronaut.
Hold on, try not to get too excited.
I mean, that sounds pretty awesome.
He wasn't listening until I said Ryan Gosling. He's like, oh, I love The Notebook.
Yeah. The Notebook's getting a sequel?
It's The Notebook in space. Well, today it was announced that Phil Lord and Chris Miller, I guess no movement on that Artemis adaptation. They said, forget it. Let's adapt a different Andy Weir book. So they're going to be helming this production. Part of the reason they got hired is because Ryan Gosling, after reading a manuscript for the book, thought that they would be perfect for the part. He's going to be one of the producers and was able to convince MGM to bring these 2 directors on board. So should we be excited about this? Let's start with, what did we think of The Martian? Or actually, Adam, you've got some Andy Weir cred, right? You were on the weird train before The Martian was even a thing.
True. I don't know if this counts as cred because I don't actually know how long he's been around, but I remember reading a short story by him online called The Egg years before The Martian came out, and it was kind of a cool, mind-blowing short story about the afterlife and being reincarnated and things like that.
Wow, that actually sounds really awesome. I want to read that.
Yeah, you should read it.
And The Martian, what did you think of that book, that movie?
So the book was great. The movie, I have to confess, I've only seen pieces of it. I thought it looked fine, but I remember loving the book.
I don't even know why I rang that bell. I guess that was just taking away your Weir cred.
Yeah.
Shame.
Shame. And that scene involved a bell too, right?
That's why I did it.
There you go. So I read the book, or I listened to the book, which was great, and I enjoyed the movie. I wouldn't say I was over the moon with it. I didn't love it.
No, you weren't over the moon. You were on Mars.
I love watching a competent character, especially in an underdog tale, which is what this book and what this movie was. But somehow when I was watching the movie, it felt kind of small stakes to me after a bit, mainly because the character was so competent that eventually I felt like he's going to get out of this. And that underdog feel just started to dissipate for me. Overall, though, I was a fan, and I've been looking forward to whatever comes next from Andy Weir. So I'm sure this is going to be a solid movie, but some of the questions I have about it are, number one, The Martian had some comedic elements. The main character was a funny guy. In fact, The Martian won Best Comedy at the Golden Globes, which was sort of, I think they just put it in that category because it was easier to win than Best Drama.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if this next film is going to lean heavier into those comedic elements, because Lord and Miller, the directors here, their names come up all the time. So when I looked them up on IMDb, I expected to see the 50 movies they've directed. They've actually produced a bunch of movies. They've been involved in a bunch of movies. They've only actually directed 4 movies. So this is going to be their 5th. Those movies are Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Lego Movie, and 21 and 22 Jump Street, those 2 movies. So everything they've done has had a heavy comedic element to it. So I wonder if that's part of why they were hired for this. And the other thing I'm thinking about is, my one complaint about The Martian is I felt like maybe it was kind of small stakes. Sounds like Ryan Gosling in this one is going to be saving the world. So it looks like we're going bigger stakes here.
But the bigger stakes, so I got excited about this movie based on the original description of the premise, but then seeing what the directors have made in the past, that kind of counterbalances the high stakes sound of the premise.
Right, because those are good movies. Those are solid movies. The thing in their career has been premises that seem very unlikely to work as a movie. Lego Movie. Nobody expected that to work. They knocked it out of the park. 21 Jump Street remake. 21 Jump Street sequel. Nobody expected that to be a good movie, and both of them were solid. Both of them were funny. But that just doesn't get me as excited as a sci-fi hardcore movie. So if this does lean heavier into comedy, it'll be a good movie. It'll just be less of what I'm looking for in an Andy Weir adaptation. Now let's go into speculation mode. We have a very vague premise here. One astronaut who somehow has the fate of the world in his hands. How could that be, Adam? What could be going on here where it all comes down to Gosling?
Well, he could try to find one habitable planet, just like in
Interstellar?
Yeah.
I had a few theories. One, he has to sit down for a tense negotiation with extraterrestrials.
I like that.
I like that. I think it's unlikely. Maybe they're out there trying to stop an asteroid, but the rest of the crew has died. Gosling is the only one left. Natural disaster route. The other potential route, and for some reason my gut tells me this is the way they're going to go, human technology gone awry. That seems to be a big theme these days, is that somehow we're going to totally screw up and put ourselves in a dire situation. So what if there's some kind of satellite quantum weapon that's going wrong? Gosling's got to stop it.
You don't even need a quantum weapon. If you just have a tungsten, I think, rod of just the right size, if you drop it from space, it could actually cause explosions larger than any nuclear bomb that's ever been detonated.
What is a tungsten rod?
It's just a rod made out of tungsten, which is an element.
God, it's a dangerous element?
The element itself isn't dangerous, but for some reason, it's like a theoretical weapon that people have described in physics that it's basically just a really heavy rod made of tungsten, and for some reason with that material, if you drop it from space and let it hit the earth, it'll unleash so much energy that it'll be like bigger than a hydrogen bomb.
Well, when they release the actual title for this movie, if it's Tungsten Rod, that's amazing. Yeah. And you're gonna get a bell for that. All right, well, moving on to Scream 5. The last Scream movie came out in 2011. There have been 4 Scream films, 3 seasons of a television series, and it was finally announced last year in November that Scream 5 is on the way. A couple of months ago, we learned that Matthew Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette are directing the film. They are the directing pair that came out with Ready or Not last year, a horror movie that was pretty well received. And it was announced today by The Hollywood Reporter that David Arquette is returning as Deputy Sheriff Dewey Riley. He was in all 4 Scream movies, so he's been around since the beginning of the franchise. In an interview, David Arquette said the following: "I am thrilled to be playing Dewey again and to reunite with my Scream family, old and new. Scream has been such a big part of my life, and for both the fans and myself, I look forward to honoring Wes Craven's legacy." What else do we know about this movie? Neve Campbell is in talks to return. She played Sidney Prescott, main character in the old Scream films, and it's going to be written by James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick. Every time there's a movie coming up, we all put our heads together and try to figure out, is this going to be good?
Yeah.
Should we be looking forward to it? And we do that by looking at the cred of the writers and the directors. So the directors are pretty new, and they do have at least one good, successful horror film under their belt. Let's look at the writers. Vanderbilt wrote Zodiac.
Good movie.
Great movie. He also wrote Murder Mystery, the recent Netflix Adam Sandler, Jennifer Aniston film, which we didn't see because we don't watch the Netflix Adam Sandler movies. And just overall, I haven't watched it, but from what I hear, not a great movie. And then Busick was one of the co-writers on Ready or Not. So this is one of those cases where it could go either way. I'm going to stay optimistic. I'm a fan of the Scream movies. But let's start there. Adam, Alun, what is your relationship to the Scream franchise? Have you seen the movies? Do you care about them? Does it move your needle at all to hear a 5th Scream movie is on the way?
A little bit. I do
even-tempered as always.
I do like the Scream movies. I'm not sure I saw the last one, though.
Yeah, Scream 4.
Did you?
I saw that one, yeah.
Was it good?
It was solid. It was, I think, a 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I would agree with that score.
I feel Scream, it's got the nostalgia bump for me. So even if it's bad, it's gonna get a few more points from me.
Yeah.
You know, my subconscious can't help it.
The same is true for me. I think I've probably only seen 1 or 2 of the Scream movies, and it was so long ago that I don't remember, or I was so young that I didn't understand it.
Right.
But I loved wearing the Scream masks for Halloween. Like, we had just the classic one, the glow-in-the-dark orange one. There was one that you could connect this like little pump to it and squeeze this fake blood, and it would like drip down through the mask.
We own that mask?
I don't think so, but I was jealous of my friends who had it.
Do we have the Hollywood Reporter article pulled up right now? Pull that up, because I just want to pull the Scream mask up on the screen. What child of the 90s could look at that and not get excited?
Yeah.
Feel a little chill come down your spine. And then a laugh, because the movies did such a great job of balancing true horror and funny subversion of the horror genre. And that's why I've been such a fan of the Scream movies, because you and me, Adam, I think, are both horror fans. Alon, you're a horror fan too.
Yeah.
But we lean, at least I lean more towards the fun horror, not the dour, disturbing, depressing horror. I like that stuff too, but for me, Scream was that great middle ground where it was scary, but it was also just fun. I even enjoyed the TV series on MTV, which then moved to VH1. At least the first 2 seasons, to me, it successfully delivered that slasher vibe every week, and it gave me an excuse to watch teen melodrama without feeling weird about it. And like I said, I thought Scream 4 was solid. And do we need a Scream 5? I mean, for me, the horror genre continues to change and evolve over time. Every decade of horror looks different than the previous decade. So I think you can continue to update the Scream franchise to just come back and subvert horror tropes. Now, one thing I'm curious about, though, is the slasher film is not really a thing anymore. I mean, it's starting to come back a little bit. We saw Halloween in 2018 going back to one of the oldest slasher movies. But what are they going to do in Scream 5? Are they going to try and subvert new horror tropes? Are they going to somehow comment on the fact that slashers have gone out of style? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on what you would want to see.
It might involve technology.
Oh, good point.
Something
Yeah.
with the internet or some kind of spooky element there.
Right, and we've seen elements of that before. There was a terrible Halloween movie back in the early 2000s, I think, where it was a reality show, and then Mike Myers showed up and started killing people.
Where was the letters like or the number
H2O or something?
2K in there?
I think it was Halloween H2O.
Oh, okay.
So they could go that route. And I'll also say I'm glad that they're going the sequel route and not doing a total reboot. We didn't know that for sure until we saw this casting today that David Arquette is back. We heard that they were talking to Neve Campbell, so that seemed to be the way they were going. I'm also not that surprised by it, though. After Halloween came back, bringing Jamie Lee Curtis back into the fold, after Terminator Dark Fate brought back Linda Hamilton, the reboot/sequel, or legacy-quel, as people are calling it these days, seems to be the way to go. I am curious which way they're going to go, though. They could take the safe route, which is what I think Halloween did. When they brought back Jamie Lee Curtis, they didn't really do that much new. They just did their best to create a solid entry in the Halloween franchise. Nothing wrong with that. I'm sure these writers and directors can do that, and I'll enjoy it. But I would love to see them take a little bit of a risk. Somehow reinvent the franchise, do something new, while still paying tribute to Wes Craven and everything he did. That'll be tough to pull off. I have no idea what that would look like, but that's what I'm hoping for.
I think it'll look something like this.
I think you're probably right. Though the first 2 seasons of the Scream TV series somehow couldn't get the rights to the Scream mask. So they had to invent a new one where it was less like this and more like this.
You know, the masks that we own didn't look like that either.
Maybe they were unlicensed.
Might have been.
These were the discount masks.
They were a little different.
Yeah, we were trying to sell unlicensed Scream knockoff masks out of our garage back in the day.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on from Scream, let's talk about Batman. Anytime there's even a little kernel of information about the new Batman film, as far as we know, it's going to be titled The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves. anytime there's even a little tidbit, we've got to scrape it up and talk about it because I'm very hyped for this movie. So today there was an article talking about an interview with Colin Farrell where he spoke a little bit about playing the Penguin. Now, one concern people have about this new Batman film is that it's going to feel overstuffed with too many villains. You've got Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, could be a villain, maybe not, it's unclear. Paul Dano as the Riddler, John Turturro as Carmine Falcone, and of course, Colin Farrell as the Penguin. So, in the interview, Farrell had this to say about Penguin. I had only started it, and I can't wait to get back. The creation of it, the aesthetic of the character has been fun, and I really am so excited to get back and explore it. I haven't got that much to do. I have a certain amount in the film. I am not all over it by any means, but there are a couple of some tasty scenes I have in it, in my creation, and I can't wait to get back. Yeah, I totally feel like it is something that I have not had the opportunity to explore before. It feels original and fun, but I am only at the start of the journey, so I can't wait to get back and really get into it. So I'm pretty happy about this because I am very curious to see what Colin Farrell does with the Penguin role. But if I had to pick between Penguin and Riddler, I think I'm more intrigued by the Riddler character and what Paul Dano is going to do in that role. But I'm curious what Farrell's going to do with the Penguin and how much they're going to lean into the absurd elements of it. Like, how much, Adam, would you love to see Colin Farrell leading an army of penguins?
That sounds fun. And actually, Colin Farrell, for some reason, I have an easy time picturing him as a penguin, as the penguin.
As a penguin. Actually, speaking of picturing him, we do have an out-of-focus, blurry set photo of Colin Farrell as the Penguin. If we want to take a look at that. Look at that. There you go.
Yeah.
So we can at least tell he's going to have his trademark umbrella. We'll see if it turns into a machine gun or anything. Adam, what do you remember about the Penguin from our days on Gil Reads Comics, where we used to talk about comic books?
He makes a lot of puns.
Okay. I don't even know if that's accurate, to be honest, but sure.
He's sad. He's a very sad character.
That's
right?
true.
Did he lose his wife?
Well, in the iteration we were reading, he lost his wife. Mm-hmm. Some other interesting things about Penguin. He is typically seen as the one Batman villain who is sane. He's completely logical. He's very intelligent. So I think that makes him a good antagonist for Batman, especially in this movie, considering they are supposedly going to be leaning pretty heavily into the detective aspect. So if we're going to see Batman using his intellect, it makes sense that he's up against someone like the Penguin, who is maybe equally as smart or potentially smarter. What I'm picturing for this villain is Kingpin from Daredevil. Alon, remember how terrifying the Kingpin was? And he was a physical presence, but he was also just smart, and he was great at playing that chess game against Daredevil.
In the Spider-Man movie, you mean?
No.
Yeah, I do remember.
Okay. I'm talking about, of course, Kingpin in the Daredevil Netflix series. I don't even know, was that a joke or was
Yeah, I was just picturing him in my head with his face in the middle of his giant body. And
oh, you're talking about Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, what is he talking about? Now, I will say it's kind of hard to read a lot into what Colin Farrell's saying here, because saying that he doesn't have a lot to do in the movie can be misleading. There are a lot of villains that have made a big impact in a movie with very little screen time. Are you guys ready to have your minds blown?
Yes.
When you think of the Dark Knight, Batman, the Dark Knight, who do you think of? Think of the Joker, Heath Ledger.
Oh, I was going to say Christian Bale.
Well, when I think of the Dark Knight, I think of the Dark Knight Batman.
Well, what are we talking about here? We're talking about Batman villains. Dark Knight, synonymous with the Joker. He was in that movie for 25 minutes. So
wow.
A lot less screen time than Batman, but at least I walked away from that movie with Joker on the mind. Star Wars A New Hope. The big villain in that movie, Darth Vader, 8 minutes of screen time.
No.
Whoa.
That's right. So Riddler, the Penguin could be a big part of this movie. And what I'm hoping for is that he's used sparingly, but he's used effectively in a frightening, terrifying, menacing way. and that's what I'm hoping to see. Any other thoughts on Batman, Penguin, Colin Farrell?
I'm ready to. I really have not watched many of the recent DC movies, but something about this one, Robert Pattinson as Batman, it's getting me kind of excited. I think I'll actually watch this one.
Well, you watched all the Christopher Nolan Batman movies.
Oh, definitely.
It's just the current DC EU that you've been passing on. And even that, you watched Wonder Woman, right?
No.
No.
Even though that was supposed to be good.
Oh, and you watched Wonder Woman.
Yeah,
There you go.
it was good.
Yeah, I haven't been blown away by anything from DC. Honestly, my favorite DC EU movie post Nolan, it was probably Man of Steel. I actually quite enjoyed Zack Snyder's take on Superman in that movie, and I've been disappointed by just about everything else from DC since then, though I did enjoy Wonder Woman, and I do have very high hopes for the Batman. Anyway, with that, I think we can wrap up our news stories for the day. What do we have coming up for One Take? A couple of things I want to shout out. We're currently working on a video that looks at Westworld, taking everything we know about next season. We're going to do predictions, speculation, and just get hyped for next season. And then we're going to give Better Call Saul the same treatment. Just talk about what do we want to see and what do we think we're going to see in the final season of Better Call Saul. Other than that, guys, anything else you want to shout out in the One Take universe or just in the world of film and television in general? Anything you've been watching, listening to, entertainment
I'm
related?
excited for the new Paper Mario coming out in July.
Oh, the Origami World?
King.
Yeah.
The Origami King.
Yes.
The Origami King. Yes. Xavier Lee in the chat. Hello, Xavier Lee says, do Snowpiercer. Honestly, I might watch the first episode, but just from what I saw in the trailer, what I'm hearing about that show, I'm not super excited for it. So I'll watch the first episode potentially, and if I enjoy it, we'll talk about it. But if not, we'll probably pass on it. Have you watched it yet, Xavier? If you have, let us know if you how you would rate it, if it's worth watching. Otherwise, I've still been on my Ricky Gervais kick. I went through all of Afterlife and then started going through it again. I watched Derek, been listening to the old XM radio show, and I've been rewatching Extras. So I am very high on Ricky Gervais right now. I can't wait to see whatever he does next. And I think with that, Adam, we can wrap it up. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and of course, the bell icon to make sure you get notified the next time we go live. And quick reminder that we'll be doing One Take Daily every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So you're definitely going to want to make sure you hit that bell icon so you can join the chat. And like Xavier Lee here, you can be an amazing human being and be part of the chat. So with that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next One Take.